Palestine space. There is not one case of settler colonial successful case, and there are actually many settler colonial cases that we don't really pay attention to. There was almost one person that was supposed to come from Japan to talk about settler colonialism, Japanese settler colonialism in Japan itself against certain group. There was another one that we also missed to bring that was supposed to talk about settler colonial cases in Scandinavia against certain groups and people. Never succeeds, of course, but we know from history that settler colonialism could last long time, 100 years, 200 years, 800 years like the Arabs and Muslims and Spain and Portugal and Andalusiyya. But until then, I think it's very important for us as indigenous community to think of what we do until that time comes, until liberation comes. And here I think colonial studies, and especially the psychology of the oppressed, is very important to pay attention to. I'm not talking only about the colonization of the mind, but also psychologically how we behave in many ways, as Ibn Khaldun said or wrote hundreds of years ago, and Fanon almost 80 years ago or so, about how the oppressed often imitates the oppressor. And we do that, and it's okay to acknowledge that. Settlers come to not only eliminate the physical, like the population, and as I said before, the culture, the economy, and the social fabric, but also they try to eliminate the nature around us, the ecology around us, uprooting our trees, planting their own trees, the trees that don't belong to our ecosystem. Actually, they disrupt it. They use more than what our natural trees use as far as water resources and so on and so forth. What we do, we imitate, and in this way, actually, settlers in general, wherever they go, they try to change the nature to feel at home. In this case, in our case, Jewish settlers try to plant all kinds of trees that are similar to European environment, so European nature. And we often imitate them if you go around and see what trees we have around us. And the same thing with architecture. We try to imitate them, even though we have a very rich heritage of architecture that is very kind of close to our kind of environment, the heat, the climate, and so on and so forth. Settlers use violence against the indigenous people. What Patrick Wolf in many ways missed is that also we do the same to each other. And if we think about, for example, areas colonized in 48, almost on a daily basis there is some killing of Arabs, of Palestinians to other Palestinians. And this period during the election, it's much more intensified, but it happens all the time. You don't see the same gangs who are active in Palestinian towns and villages active in Jewish towns and cities. And that, I think, the mentality of the oppressed explains that. It's easier for the Palestinian to kill another Palestinian. It's a bit more difficult because the state will punish them, for sure. But I think there is kind of psychology that I can kill my own easier, or maybe there is much more psychology in it than we admit. And the concept of elimination, again, if we use it this way, extend it this way, how we eliminate each other in many ways, not only physically in violence and killing, but we eliminate each other on even a small disagreement. Political disagreements turn into complete elimination against individuals, groups. We eliminate each other around all kinds of things that supposedly normal to have disagreements on politics, but it's not normal to be the only or the main battle that we have vis-a-vis the structure that we live in. For example, if you look at areas colonized in 48, the main battle, the main energy, the large amount of energy that is put between different political groups against this group against the other, makes the whole energy invested into internal political fighting, rather than focusing on the state. The state is still, they fight the state and challenge its policies. But if you look at the energy and the activities they do, and the writings and everything else, the main focus will be, or is, who is more correct and who is the true leader among them. And the same thing happens in my view, in areas colonized in 67. Any small disagreement between groups leads to complete war, sometimes even violent war, where Israel becomes kind of secondary in that struggle, not the main target on a daily basis. And I think that's important for us to think about as an indigenous community, and not to kind of put it as brush it aside, brush it away. So decolonization, I think, has many levels. One is, that I talked about in the way, how should we deal with the situation we're living in and the different negative events, negative aspects that we suffer from colonialism and settler colonialism, to kind of like a long-term process of healing that we need to engage with our own internal ills rather than pushing them aside. Two, I think it's very important to connect, to think of decolonization in the larger sense, not only as like I wrote before. It's not about just a state or not a state. We should decolonize if we have a state, or if we don't have a state, we should decolonize as a community. And there are many studies around that. Is that right? Okay. So I'll just briefly think, for example, through 2 minutes, through all kinds of writings about decolonization. One is decolonizing our mind, knowledge-wise. It's very important. But also to think about alternative systems that we should look for. Ibn Khaldun has some, and others also have other suggestions that we could think of. For Ibn Khaldun, a free community cannot be free without being economically sustainable community. We need to think about economic sustainability. We need to think about also other conditions that makes us a group, asabiyya, like how we could create a sense of collective feeling, collective asabiyya. Asabiyya that goes beyond religion, beyond political parties, and beyond regional differences, which often we don't pay attention to. There is a lot of rhetoric among political parties about the Palestinian people, but there is a lot of surely not ignorance, but marginalization. I'm not talking about the internal kind of frictions and divisions around religion, around regional differences, and so on and so forth. We need to think about collective asabiyya that brings us together. Doesn't mean we don't differ on things, but the larger goal of us, or the larger goal of our community should focus on what are the most common things that we could agree on to sustain us to be a community together. I will stop here now and